part two of a new episode of Let's Talk with Greg and
Thomas.
when we are back. So we're starting to talk a little bit more about the Ukraine war. Thomas, do you want to go ahead and present the latest of what's happening? We're also going to show a clip too.
Yeah, so, well, we obviously just had the State of the Union, and basically with Ukraine, and we're having so many sanctions right now. The United States is trying to place pressure on the Russian government and Ukraine is also, you've got sitting political figures asking for a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which is effectively asking for World War III. There's just so much going on and with this particular issue, and I think what's lost in the discourse over all of this is how this even got here in the first place, how this ended up happening in the first place, and why Russia would decide to invade. I think that's what's lost in the discourse a lot.
Yeah, and Russia did in fact, invade Ukraine, and there has been a lot of violence in the nation. Buildings have been bombed, even children's hospitals, and it's terrible what's happening right now. But later on, we are going to be talking about a lot of hypocrisy that has been happening when it comes to this war. So I'm going to go ahead and show y'all the latest of what's happening.
Russia warned that it would attack the NATO resupply routes, and that is what they did. A barrage of missiles struck the military base just before 4 a.m. on Sunday morning. This base has been a hub for some of the weapons that have been brought in from Europe and a center to train foreign fighters joining the conflict. We don't know if any of
де застосований миротворчий, де відбувається навчання миротворчі, і побачиш, там відбуваються вибухи. І вибухи було десь більше 10 вибухів. Тут почали сусіди бігти в підвал, я тоді кажу, що це підвал.
the wounded were taken to a nearby hospital. We watched as more and more arrived throughout the morning, some with serious injuries to their heads and limbs. By lunchtime, the hospital was full. Ambulances queued outside to take the wounded elsewhere. This soldier told me that the first missile struck before the warning sirens had even gone off. It was like hell, he said. Many of the wounded asked us not to film their faces. Their families have fled to Europe, whilst they've stayed behind to help, and they understandably don't want them to see what's happened. It is too early to know whether this is a new front in the war or just a one-off attack. Either way, no one here, or in NATO's capitals, will sleep easy tonight. Alistair Bunkers, News in West.
Okay, so you saw what's happening right now, and this has been an issue, ever since 2014, when Russia wanted to annex Crimea.
Yeah.
And just one, I want to get your take on what we just saw and what's been happening, what you personally think of this.
Well, I think what gets lost a lot in the discourse is the idea that we have to pick sides in this conflict. I think there are people who support Ukraine and at the expense of Russian people, and then there are people who basically are skeptical of Ukraine, but also support what Russia is doing. And I think it's not a case of one side or the other. What Putin has done is demonstrably demagoguery. Like, this is to invade and kill innocent Ukrainian civilians is wrong, full stop.
Mhm.
But having said that, what went through in 2014, where the United States initially basically concocted a coup of the Ukrainian government and were able to put in place their own form of government, and the ever-growing pressure to basically make sure that Ukraine joins NATO was always going to escalate this crisis. And we're essentially seeing a replay of what happened in the Cold War involving Afghanistan. We're seeing a proxy war being played out, and the United States is again at the forefront of these proxy wars. That is inevitably going. Well, inevitably, basically the people that are going to suffer the most from this are Ukrainian innocent civilians, Russian innocent civilians, the working class of that area, and Europe as a whole is going to suffer because of this proxy war between the United States and Russia, essentially.
You mentioned, this is just, another proxy war. We got out of Afghanistan, and I feel like, the world was just like, okay, we need to make another war because wars make money, because we are in bed with the military-industrial complex. This is just another example of that. I want to touch up on the hypocrisies of this situation. What really irks me is when we talk about war crimes. Yes, what Russia did is wrong. Call it out as much as you want, because it is wrong. Let's talk about the war crimes about the US, though. The many war crimes. We can go back as recent as, 2014 when Obama did drone strikes on a wedding in Yemen.
You don't even have to go that far
You
back.
don't even have to go
you
that
can go right now in the Syrian conflict in Syria and Yemen. You can look at Yemen and see that the United States is not only funding but selling arms to Saudi Arabia to
And
bomb.
Palestine, we're
And
giving
Palestine
funds to
right now. Somalia, America just dropped bombs in Somalia again. Like, these are current conflicts. I think what we're seeing right now, and especially with what the media and how the media has been portraying this, is they're ultimately deciding that because it's a European war and because we sort of sympathize with our European neighbors, which is also code for white.
This is clearly a race issue.
There's a clear race and also a post-colonial issue. Where the reality is that Africa as a whole is seen as third world, or this always happens there, or that war in these areas is just normal. It's not normal. What happened in Afghanistan is not normal. War is never normal. These things should not be normalized whatsoever. And the reality that these conflicts are somehow different to what's happening in Ukraine is like you said, hypocrisy at its utmost.
Yeah, you have it with international unity for Ukraine. Where was the unity in Syria? Where is the unity in Palestine? Where's the unity for Yemen? Where's the unity for Somalia? There is war everywhere going on in this world. That doesn't need to happen. And the international community is silent on that. The liberal establishment is silent on that. And it's only because these are white Europeans. Period. White Europeans, finally getting what, happens to, nations of color.
Yeah, and it's like instances like, for example, the Congo and what that's gone through. If you ever watch the documentary Virunga and National Park, and you see when it comes to things like oil exploration, and then it's apparently okay to back battalions in that region to basically take care of people living in that, as long as it comes from Western countries as long as these things are funded by the right people.
Yeah.
Apparently this is the right war, and the reality is it's never a good thing ever, and conflict should not be dissected in a way where this is so as long as you're a good person doing it, it's fine. Apparently, as long as you're the right people doing it, it's fine, and it's framed in a way where as long as you are not these people doing it, it's apparently different, and this is where the hypocrisy needs to be called out, and it's right now is where it needs to be called out. And you've got people in the discourse who are basically saying now's not the time, we have to stand with the Ukrainian people. No, now is the time. Now is the time, because people need to see the blatant hypocrisy that is going on with things like Palestine, with things like Israel, which is an apartheid state, which is doing what it's doing in Palestine, and it needs to be called out because the humanitarian crisis that we're facing around the globe has led to this. And I think Europe has been blind to the idea that this couldn't ever happen again. This could never reach us. And it's like, you've allowed this to take place on other soil for so long, and you've not called it out for what it rightfully has been happening in these regions. And now it's on your doorstep, and now it's suddenly an issue.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And let's talk about the hypocrisy when it comes to, yes, little cat, leave us alone. This is the moment she wants to do her zoomies. She always chooses the worst time to do it. Anyway, another hypocrisy of this is refugees. We have a lot of Americans opening their homes to refugees. We've always had a refugee crisis, and not just because of war, but of also climate change. And we're going to continue to see that. Are you going to open your doors then when it's not just white people? You have other countries, opening up their borders for them, for these white Europeans. And not just that, right now, there was a video of Black people couldn't even get out of the country.
Yeah.
They were literally stopping them from leaving the country.
Yeah, and apparently to point that out is pro-Putin, right? To call out the blatant racism that exists, even in a time of war, even in a time of crisis. Apparently, we're not all equal, right? And shocking. It's not shocking. The reality is that these things have to be called out as we see them, as it's happening. I think I also want to touch on the idea of sanctions, because what we're seeing right now, especially from the West in particular, United States has been really, American companies have been very adamant and very strong with this, is basically they're pulling out all their business, everything to do with Russia is being pulled out right now. And sanctions are being pushed now by, there's a liberal consensus to push sanctions on the Russian people. I just want to defeat the argument. Russian people are not, they are going to bear the brunt of the Putin regime. And by sanctioning them, you are making it worse for them. They already live under a false democracy. They're already, if they protest, they already get put in jail for like 20 years for the right. The right of protest doesn't exist in Russia.
They literally just jailed a 94-year-old woman protesting.
And so the idea that sanctions is going to somehow bring these people to bring down the Putin government is just wrong. You are hurting working class Russian people who have no say in how this government functions. Very similar to the United States, right? And so the reality is that to punish, we see this with sanctions all the time. We've seen how it happened, what it does to places like Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. They can't get certain medication because of sanctions. It harms working class people.
It doesn't hurt the oligarchs
who do not deserve to be hurt in the way that you're supposedly thinking that sanctions don't, like I said, they don't hurt the people that have true power. They only hurt the poorest people.
And people make the argument, well, if it hurts the people, then it's going to pressure the government to actually like stop. You think that they care about their own goddamn people? You really think that they care about their own people when they are trying to put up this false democracy? They can't. You mentioned it before. They can't even protest.
Yeah.
So who they can give two fucks for the people? I think it makes sense.
And you know, it's like this. It's the same with, for example, it's the same with what Facebook and Instagram's doing right now, where they're waiving their violence policies on pro-Ukrainian messages in regards to the Russia invasion. Right? They're allowing people like the Azov Battalion, who are known far right. It's a far right organization that has. What I believe to be Nazi symbolism, right? This idea that they're allowed to post videos of them greasing bullets with pig lard because it's supposed to be a pro-Ukrainian message. It's like this is not okay. All it's going to do is it's going to create a disdain for Russian people in general. You're seeing it in America right now, where people are throwing paint at Russian businesses, right? With Ukrainian paint colors, because somehow that's going to solve the crisis. Russian people are not to blame.
Yeah.
It's the regime, it is Putin, it's his government, not the Russian people. And it's sickening to see, because we're seeing in real time so many people who you would think would be anti-war and protect people are suddenly turning. They're advocating for sanctions. They're advocating for war crimes. They're advocating for a no-fly zone. When we all know what's going.
That is literally the start of
You are
World War
literally.
III.
We're saber rattling with a nuclear power.
Because here's the thing, y'all. If a no-fly zone happens, okay, let's say they do that. The minute a Russian airplane goes by, we shoot it down. It's an automatic act of war. They declare war.
Yeah.
Then World War III, boom. And I mean, they already know. They already are very clear. They will use nuclear weapons. They're attacking nuclear power plants. They don't give a fuck.
Well, what did Putin say? Right, he basically said that if you try your hand and you fought and and Ukraine tries to go ahead with joining NATO, they would invade. And what did they do? They invaded. Right. So they're not fooling around here. Like you've pushed it to a point where you're forcing this conflict, and the end result of this will be nuclear war.
Yeah.
Like even the most asinine people, like my home country's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, one of the most awful prime ministers we've ever had in history, he recognizes that a no-fly zone is World War III.
Well, maybe I don't know, because if Margaret Thatcher was in this bitch, we know she'd be advocating for that no-fly zone. So I don't know if he's the worst.
I think a lot of this issue stems from the fact that America has never seen real conflict. They've never had it in their own soil. It's always been on someone else's soil, on someone else's country, on someone else's land. And so the idea of war is just non-existent to them. They've never felt the pressure of sanctions. They've never felt the pressure of what war does. And it's created this bubble where people believe that things like a no-fly zone is a rational thought, when the reality is it is not a rational solution to this conflict. It's just not.
It's very scary, y'all, but I want to leave y'all with this. Stay vigilant, call out the hypocrisy when it happens, and also call out all war that is happening in real time. Constantly share what's happening in Palestine. Constantly share what's happening in Yemen. Constantly share what's happening anywhere. Because any war is wrong. Period. Thank you for watching Let's Talk with Greg and
Thomas.
And we will see you next week to tell y'all.
Thanks a lot.